Hi, and welcome. You're listening to the X22 Report. My name is Dave, and this is episode 1282A, and today's date is May 17th, 2017, and the title of the episode is Central Bankers Are Now Trying to Explain Away the Collapse. Let's get into the economic collapse financial news. Now, today we can see the market, well, it completely crashed on all this news about Trump. I guess he figured out a way to bring the economy down, because what we're seeing right now is that the stock market, well, that has fallen by 370 points. Now, we know that the plunge protection team, the high-frequency traders, they can completely control the market. They can make it go up. They can make it go down. They can do whatever they want. It's a computer programming. The Fed has complete control of the entire thing. But what we're seeing here is that the central bank, the U.S. government, they're trying to explain away why the economy has never taken off and why the economy is not doing well. And we need to remember something very important. And I said this in past reports. The corporate media is going to let you know when the economy is going to fall apart, because they're going to start reporting on certain news stories on how the economy is not doing well, because what they are doing is they're setting up the propaganda for the central bank, for the deep state, to explain this away and why it's all Trump's fault, or maybe another country. It all depends on how this all plays out. And they will start with certain news broadcasts, and they'll start telling you the economy is not doing well. And we're actually getting some information and some news that they've already started. And we can see right now that the central bankers, they love debt. Now, every time the corporate media comes out there and they tell you great news, debt is expanding, more people have more debt, that's not good news. It's good news for the central banks. It's not good news for the people, because if you know what debt is and you're in a lot of debt, you know the feeling. It's not good because you can't make the payments. But for the central bank, it's incredible. Now, the reporting that the total debt held by the U.S. household, well, it has reached $12.73 trillion in the first quarter of 2017. Now, this surpassed the $12.68 trillion peak that we reached in 2008. This is not good. Now, this is coming from the New York Fed's latest quarterly report on household debt. Yes, they love this. This is incredible. But this tells us that people are at their max, just like they were back in 2008. Now, this marked a $479 billion increase from a year ago, and up $149 billion from the fourth quarter of 2016. Think about all the jobs that have been lost. Think about all the corporations that have been laying off. Think about all the retail stores that have been closing. And all these people who can't find jobs. What do they end up doing? They live off of debt because they don't have income coming in, and this is the only way they can survive until they can find another job. Or they survive by receiving unemployment insurance and basically countering it with debt. And what we're seeing right now is that this sign right here that they're out there telling everyone that it's great, it's not good. This is another indicator that things are rapidly falling apart. Now, what's very interesting about all of this is that Wells Fargo, which is the biggest U.S. mortgage lender, well, they reported a historic collapse in new mortgage applications, which shows us that the American people, they're not going out and they're not purchasing houses like they're telling us. So something's wrong here, because what we're seeing is that mortgages are declining, but they keep trying to convince us that housing purchases, well, they're doing fantastic. But we know how that's done. We know that is done through hedge funds and investment companies, through foreign investors, from banks not releasing the foreclosed houses onto the market, and the hedge funds and investment companies are keeping those houses off the market to drive the prices up. But what's very interesting about the New York Fed report, it has to do with credit inquiries, credit demand. And remember, back in 2008, the credit per household reached all-time new highs. Now, we surpassed that. But right after that, things started to go south. And credit inquiries, credit demand collapsed. We're seeing the same thing right now. Remember, a couple reports ago, we talked about how all of a sudden credit completely collapsed, and the New York Fed reported on it. And this actually shows that credit is collapsing right now. Unexpectedly, they're saying. Now, it is expected because we're seeing auto loans, while the demand for that declining. Credit card demand declining. We're seeing business loans, commercial bank loans declining. And what this means is that we've seen this before. We've seen this prior to 2008. We're seeing it once again. And it's all falling apart right in front of our eyes. Now, housing is continually getting worse and worse. Remember, during the spring and summer months, this is the hot season for housing. Real estate normally does very, very well during this period of time. The weather's warmer, and it's a lot easier to move into a home. But mortgage applications right now, they drop by negative 4.1%. And refinancing is also dropped by negative 5.7%. So what we're seeing right now is that there's been no uptick in mortgage applications, which means there's no uptick in housing purchases, which actually the data that's coming back to us is showing that new starts are down, existing home sales are down, and we can see that this is going to continue. Yes, they move up and down a little bit, but the trend is down. Now, the central bankers are coming up with this brand new theory because they can't explain why the economy is not doing well, why all the retail stores are closing and no one's purchasing homes, and they're trying to figure all this out. Well, we know why. It's because everyone's getting laid off. Nobody has disposable income. Everyone's making less and less money. More and more corporations, they're looking to lay off. There's more bankruptcies of retail stores. And they're saying, well, all of this is because the older generation, well, they're not spending their retirement. They're hoarding it. And this is the problem, because a report from money manager United Income is arguing that American retirees are saving too much money rather than too little. Now, to summarize the thesis, United Income argues that retirees become more conservative as they grow older, which causes them to save more and allocate less to equities, which is, of course, a somewhat self-serving conclusion, but let's never mind that. The only problem with the theory is that, intentional or otherwise, it's based on a complete misrepresentation of the data. Now, when we look at this, they're basing this off the mean net wealth as evidence that retirees are hoarding too much cash. Unfortunately, when combined with the fact that median net wealth is actually shrinking, it's easy to deduce that while the majority of American retirees are actually spending their retirement income, there is a group of super wealthy old folks who simply can't spend enough money to offset annual investment income growth, which speaks more to the growing wealth gap than to some economic fear that is causing retirees to hoard cash. So it's not too difficult to understand why the year-on-year spending trends collapse as old folks get older. The most wealthy retirees can only find so many ways to burn their massive nest eggs. Now, the other end of the spectrum, where you have the middle class, which is dying out, and the lower income, well, because of inflation, because of what they're receiving now, they barely have enough to survive every single day. And if you notice, most of these individuals are getting part-time jobs to make up the difference. So it's not because they're not spending money. The money is just not out there. And the 1% or the above 1%, the 0.5%, guess what? They just can't make up the difference for the rest of the population. This has been the problem since the beginning, where the 0.5%, the 1%, they have all the wealth, and everyone else, they're just getting by. They're living paycheck to paycheck. They're not getting cost of living raises. Many people are being laid off, and their whole entire theory is completely down the drain. It doesn't even make sense. They're just looking for any type of explanation of why money is not coming back into the system. And we know why it isn't, because it's all been filtered to the top. But they don't want to tell anyone that, because then they would be to blame. We also see that the U.S. government, they're out there saying, well, we've been calculating GDP incorrectly. And when we look at our numbers and we go back in time, we can see that, yeah, the GDP numbers should be a lot higher than they really are. So they went back in time and they said, we're not accounting for inflation and technology and healthcare costs because these are rapidly changing things. And we're going to redo the GDP. And when they did it, to their surprise, GDP was only about 0.4% higher. And what they were trying to do is they were trying to remanipulate the numbers. Remember, they already went back to 1929, added in research and development, and recalculated GDP all the way to the present time. They also include Obamacare, which turns into individuals spending money into the economy, which they're really not, because they're really not getting anything out of this. They were spending this money anyhow. And they include this in retail spending, which is 70% of the GDP. And this is how they've been trying to keep GDP up. Now, since a lot of people aren't taking Obamacare, we can see that GDP is decreasing, declining, especially with less manufacturing, less exports, and everything else. Everything's starting to fall apart. And they're trying to remanipulate the numbers to make it seem like this is the reason, and it just didn't work. What is happening right now is that the entire system is collapsing. They're running out of excuses of why it is collapsing, and they're trying to figure out some way to explain this. Now remember, they're bringing down the system the same time Trump is bringing down the system. The problem is the system's collapsing very, very quickly right now, and they need to control this. And I'm talking about the central banks, the deep state. Because if they lose control of it, they can't control the narrative of what has happened. If they lose the narrative of the story, they will be blamed. All fingers will be pointing at them, because what have they been telling us for the last 8-9 years? The economy has recovered. Everything is fine. Obama handed off the economy to Trump, and it was absolutely fantastic. You're trying to tell me that Trump in 4 months destroyed the economy with doing absolutely nothing to the economy? That is absolutely ridiculous. And they realize he hasn't been in office long enough to blame it on him. They need more time. And if the economy comes down too soon, well, this is a problem for them. Actually, Bill Blain is out there, and he says, while talking to accounts, I was struck by a sense of resignation. Stocks seem determined to go stratospheric, despite the fact that many people think a correction reset is coming. For instance, he said, I told stock market gains are due to passive investments like indices and ETFs rather than active management, and tight yields are unsustainable as when central banks normalize interest rates climb higher. But the bottom line is financial asset prices continue to rise despite our disbelief. Should you buy into the story at this stage of the game, the rule remains, don't join the last 5% of a rally just so you can catch the first 25% of the subsequent crash. And what we are seeing at this point is everyone's scratching their heads. They don't understand why the market's continually rising, because when you look at what's been going on in the economy, you look at the earnings, you look at everything, you can see that things are rapidly falling apart. But the stock market, except for today, has continually been moving up and up and up. The S&P 500 moving up, the NASDAQ moving up. Something is wrong. Well, we've seen this pattern in the past. This is nothing new. The takeaway from all of this is that the system is collapsing, and it's getting worse, and it's declining faster and faster. And we've been talking about getting prepared. We've been telling everyone you need to get ready. And people are asking, what do I need to do? Well, think about it. And I discussed this many, many times before. Get your food in place, get your water in place, get your medical supplies in place. Get whatever you need that you would use on a daily basis. Why? Why do you need this? Well, when the dollar ceases to be the reserve currency of the world, what happens? Well, all those dollars come flooding back to the United States, and eventually we will see inflation. the central bank will not be able to control this. And what that means is that it's going to cost a lot more to get these supplies. That's why you need the food, the medical supplies, toiletries, water, and those type of things. Because eventually what's going to happen, people are going to run to the store because prices are going to be actually the dollar is going to be devaluing so quickly that prices are going to go up very, very high. The other reason is that credit is going to freeze up during this period of time, just like we saw in 2008. Banks will not loan. They will not give businesses loan. Most of these businesses run on credit, and trucking, rail traffic, all this is going to stop. So supplies to stores are going to stop. And this is going to be an additional problem on top of the inflation. This is why you need to have those supplies. You need to have the cash on hand, because in the beginning of a collapse scenario, you will use the paper money. Even though it's devaluing, people know what that is. Next, once people decide, you know what, this paper money is absolutely worthless, I'm not accepting it anymore, they will take products, food, water, toiletries, medicine, anything that you have to trade for something else, because they'll see value in that, because it's very hard to get those supplies. Yes, there'll be a black market. Eventually, what will happen is, as time moves on, people might accept gold and silver, most likely silver, depending on how things work out. I would suggest holding on to your gold and silver, because that is your insurance policy. If you have Bitcoin, hold on to that, because the dollar will no longer cease to exist when the new currency comes online, whatever it might be. Maybe it will be Bitcoin, maybe it will be a currency that is backed in gold or silver. Well, you have that. Even if it isn't, well, they're going to reprice everything, and the gold and silver, Bitcoin, that is your insurance policy. You will also need a weapon to protect yourself. And I'm not saying that your neighbors are going to come along and get you, but there will be individuals, especially if you live close to cities, that will be roaming the streets looking for supplies. Many people have put the collapse at different time frames, 6 months, 1 year, 2 years. You need to be prepared for this. So you can see the scenario that we're looking at is going to be a complete disaster. And no matter which way we look at it, if the central bank brings it down, if Trump brings it down, it doesn't matter, because the problem is the collapse is coming no matter what. And this is why you need to be ready and prepared. Listen, everyone, thanks a lot for listening. Be well, be safe, and especially be prepared. Thanks a lot.